Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Mainstream Indie Music channel. Now, if you have seen the title and picture thumbnail of this video, you might think I'm joking. You also might find yourself in a situation that I was in, where when you thought of a lot of early 2000s indie or alternative bands, you might have thought to yourself, well, it's been a minute since I've checked in on them. I'm sure they're either still touring as a group or, at the very least, they're on a hiatus, or like it seems like a lot of these indie alternative bands have done pretty much since COVID, have just kind of quietly shut down. You know, they've kind of called it a career, or maybe they'll kind of reappear every once in a while, do a reunion tour, and then stop. In my mind, that's kind of where I had grouped the Fray. You know, I kind of assumed like, hey, you know what? They had their heyday, they had, their major label success and everything like that. And right now, they're kind of just done. They've said their story, they have their fans, and they are good to go. Well, all of that changed when I watched a concert video series online called, let me just look up the name here really quick. The concert series is called The Song TV. I highly recommend it. They really rework a lot of hit songs, and they have a lot of kind of cool artists come on the show. So I do recommend that YouTube series. But I saw a video for the Fray for their hit song, Cable Car Over My Head, or Over My Head Cable Car. Sorry if my dyslexia kicked in. But anyway, I saw the thumbnail for the video, and I thought to myself, man, their lead singer is looking real different nowadays. And the more and more I watched it, of course, I'm like, that is not their lead singer. So I decided to, investigate a little further. And right off the bat, in the comment section, people kept saying, man, Joe is just killing it. Like he is just doing so good. And, then they would say things like, it's so sad, like what happened with Isaac, but, Joe has really stepped in and done his part and stuff like that. And I'm just like, who is this guy? So, of course, I looked it up online. And in so doing, I realized I really had to make a video about this. Because, long story short here, Joe is the Fray's lead guitar player, but he's also their secondary songwriter. And so what we got to do before we get to where the Fray is at today is we have to actually go back to the beginning of the Fray. Because what I've come to realize is Joe was in the band first before Isaac. They had already somewhat started a group when they signed Isaac on. And at first he was even a little hesitant, but when he heard Isaac sing, he kind of heard the emotional depth and appeal behind his voice and realized we need this guy in our band. And so the Fray was formed. Now, the Fray had a lot of growing pains, as many of them had met together very, very young. Over My Head Cable Car was one of their very first songs that they had written, and it quickly became pretty much a crowd favorite. But without kind of going into like a long, exhaustive history of just the Fray themselves, what happened was, as you are very well aware of, their hit song, How to Save a Life, was picked up by TV show Grey's Anatomy and Scrubs within a year of each other. And when fans heard that song, they instantly were enamored with the band. Now again, as the rest of the Fray's history goes, their second album was released, which was self-titled, which had, again, a monster hit on it, You Found Me, which, again, was probably just as big as their first two singles as well. Afterwards, the band pretty much went into the same old routine that every other band goes. They would release album, they would tour off that album, they would go back into the studio, they would release another album. The Fray also would like to do a lot of covers of songs. I mean, you remember their cover of Kanye West's hit song Heartless, um, but they followed the same pattern. But this is when everything changed, because I believe it's in the year 2019, the Fray announced that they pretty much were taking a break, that they were going on hiatus because they had actually fulfilled a contract obligation and decided that once that obligation was met, they no longer wanted to keep going. Now, of course, it was kind of left up in the air as to how long or what that exactly meant. But after doing some smaller tours, the big change happened. They announced to the world that their lead singer, Isaac, was no longer going to be singing and performing with the Fray any longer. Now, with him pretty much being the staple of the band, the guy that pretty much everybody knew, in fact, it seemed like nobody really knew the rest of the band outside of their fans, other than their lead singer. It kind of seemed like this would just be the end of the Fray. It made sense. But Joe was lurking underneath. Now, was he kind of like waiting for this day to happen? Of course not. He probably never thought this day would happen. But suddenly, the Fray found themselves without a leader and without their singer and principal songwriter. And Joe decided, hey, we are not done as a band. I want the Fray to keep going if you guys will support me. And while this was a big leap, it wasn't a super shocking one. You see, because Joe had contributed 3 songs as the lead singer on their albums. So he was used to at least somewhat being the front man during some songs. But on top of that, like I mentioned previously, he was their other principal songwriter and their lead guitarist and backing vocals. So he knew the workings of each of their songs probably exclusively and intimately. So the Fray decided to give it a chance. What I've seen about Joe is pretty much the Fray don't hold Isaac to, like, they don't have any bitterness about his departure. In fact, he cites anxiety as a huge reason why he quit. So fans empathize with him. And Joe, his voice is pretty good. It's definitely more raspy than Isaac's was, but I mean, hey, he's a pretty good singer. Check them out if you haven't before. Listen to the Fray and their new music, and I'll see y'all next.